Jennifer Kesse. On the morning of January 24, 2006, Jennifer Joyce Kesse vanished from her Orlando condominium. And nearly 2 decades later, the mystery remains unsolved. Her case is now one of the most closely scrutinized missing person investigations in Florida, marked by dead ends, forensic puzzles, and the persistent efforts of both her family and law enforcement. Jennifer Kesse was 24 years old at the time of her disappearance. She worked as a finance manager at Central Florida Investments in Ocoee and lived alone at the Mosaic at Millenia, a gated condo community in Orlando. On January 23, 2006, Jennifer left work at around 6 p.m., spoke with her father during her commute, and later called her boyfriend around 10 p.m. That was the last confirmed contact with Jennifer Kesse. Evidence suggests Jennifer returned home that night. The following morning, her bathroom showed signs of recent use. A wet towel, clothing laid out, and makeup tools visible. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle inside her condo. Investigators believe she was abducted between 7:30 and 8 a.m. on January 24th, possibly while walking from her front door to her car. When she did not show up for work, her employer called her parents. By 11 a.m., her family asked the condo manager to check on her. The condo appeared undisturbed, but Jennifer and her car were gone. At approximately noon that same day, a security camera at the nearby Huntington on the Green apartment complex captured an unidentified person parking Jennifer's 2004 Chevy Malibu and walking away. The complex was about a mile from her home. The surveillance footage, however, proved nearly useless. The figure's face was obscured by fencing and poor camera angle. Forensic enhancements by NASA and the FBI only managed to narrow the person's estimated height to around 5'3" to 5'5", but provided no clear identification. On January 26th, a resident noticed Jennifer's car had been parked in the lot for several days. Police confirmed the vehicle belonged to Jennifer. Inside, they found a single latent fingerprint and a small fiber, but the car appeared to have been wiped clean. Jennifer's valuables, her purse, iPod, and keys were missing, but items of value remained untouched. No signs of robbery were evident. Jennifer's family and law enforcement immediately began canvassing the area and distributing flyers. Over the years, authorities have questioned multiple persons of interest: her ex-boyfriend, her current boyfriend, co-workers, a workplace manager, and numerous construction workers employed at her condo complex. Despite thorough interviews, no charges have been filed. The construction workers had reportedly harassed Jennifer, and language barriers complicated that part of the inquiry. DNA samples and a canine scent trail that seemed to lead from the abandoned car back toward her condo parking lot also failed to yield conclusive results. By 2010, the FBI took over the Yachty investigation from local police. In 2018, Jennifer's family sued for access to the case files, ultimately obtaining over 16,000 pages of records, which revealed significant gaps in the investigation from 2012 to 2019. In December 2022, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement assumed control of the case, retesting evidence with advanced techniques and re-interviewing witnesses. In May 2025, FDLE announced that the case was no longer considered cold. Investigators stated that several persons of interest had been identified, and previously untested evidence was uncovered. Still, no suspect has been formally named or arrested. Jennifer's family continues to fight for answers, maintaining a dedicated website and urging anyone with information to come forward. As Jennifer's father told the media, "We just want to know what happened to our daughter. We will never stop looking." Jennifer Kesse's disappearance remains an open case, one that continues to challenge both investigators and the community. For now, the truth of what happened in those early hours of January 24, 2006, remains just out of reach. Briana Maitland. On the evening of March 19, 2004, 17-year-old Briana Alexandra Maitland finished her shift at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont. She left work just after 11 p.m., intending to return to the house in Sheldon, where she was living with a friend. What happened to Briana next has remained one of Vermont's most perplexing missing person cases, marked by cryptic physical evidence, unconfirmed sightings, and unanswered questions that persist more than 2 decades later. Briana was a hard-working teenager navigating a period of change in her life. She had recently transferred schools, moved in with friends, and was employed as a dishwasher at the Black Lantern Inn. On that March night, Briana clocked out and got into her green 1985 Oldsmobile, registered to her mother. She was expected home, but never arrived. The following morning, March 20th, her car was found about a mile from the inn, backed into the side of an abandoned building known as the Old Dutchburn House, off Route 118. The vehicle's unusual position, partially inside the barn, immediately caught attention. Yet, the significance of the scene would only emerge in the days that followed. At the location, investigators found several personal items both in and around the car: coins, a water bottle, an unlit cigarette, and 2 paychecks. Briana's keys were missing. Some of her belongings, including migraine medication, were left inside the vehicle. A piece of plywood, once used to cover a broken window, was discovered resting against the car's trunk. Initially, police treated the situation as a case of either abandonment or a minor accident. The car was towed, and the site was not immediately secured as a potential crime scene. As a result, crucial time was lost, and possible evidence may have been compromised or overlooked. Briana's absence wasn't reported until March 23rd, when her mother, unable to reach her for days, contacted the police. At this point, investigators began treating the situation as a possible disappearance. Vermont State Police led the investigation, supported later by the FBI and private investigators hired by the Maitland family. Authorities canvassed the area, interviewed friends, co-workers, and local residents, and followed up on leads from the community. Among the early theories was the possibility that Briana had left of her own accord, but as evidence mounted, this was increasingly discounted. In 2016, investigators revealed they had recovered a DNA sample from Briana's car. 6 years later, in 2022, Vermont State Police announced that the DNA matched one of 11 previously tested persons of interest. However, the identity of this individual has not been made public. Police have stated that the case remains active, but no charges have been filed. Investigative efforts have included a search of a local house associated with known drug dealers. While drugs were recovered, there was no sign of Briana. In 2012, the FBI considered whether serial killer Israel Keyes might be connected to the case, but ultimately ruled him out. The investigation has faced numerous challenges. The Dutchburn house was destroyed by fire in 2016, eliminating a key site for potential evidence. Witness accounts vary. One man reported seeing the car with headlights on near midnight, while another recalled a man standing beside it and a silver Honda Civic leaving the scene. None of these reports have led to a breakthrough. Briana had reportedly been assaulted by a former friend weeks before her disappearance, a detail some have considered significant. There is also ongoing speculation about possible links to drug activity or whether her car was intentionally staged to appear abandoned. In 2024, on the 20th anniversary of Briana's disappearance, The FBI offered a $40,000 reward for information leading to her whereabouts. Vermont State Police emphasized that the case is not considered cold, and efforts to resolve it are ongoing. To this day, no confirmed sighting of Briana Maitland has been verified. As her family continues to seek answers, the hope remains that new evidence or witness testimony will finally shed light on what happened that night on Route 118. Emma Filipof. On a rainy November evening in 2012, Emma Filipof was last seen barefoot outside the Empress Hotel in Victoria, British Columbia. She was 26 years old. More than a decade later, Emma's disappearance remains one of Canada's most haunting and enigmatic missing person cases. Her final hours documented by witnesses, video footage, and a trail of puzzling details that continue to baffle investigators and family alike. Emma Filipof was originally from Perth, Ontario. In 2011, she relocated to Victoria, living a transient lifestyle, sometimes staying at women's shelters, in attics or on boats, and occasionally in the woods. She worked seasonal jobs, including at Red Fish Bluefish on Victoria's Inner Harbour, and was known to keep journals and create art, much of which would later be found among her possessions. In the days before her disappearance, Emma's behavior became increasingly withdrawn and erratic. She called her mother multiple times, alternately asking to come home and then changing her mind. On November 28, 2012, Emma moved her red 1993 Mazda MPV to the Chateau Victoria parking lot, bringing most of her belongings with her. Emma's last confirmed day was marked by a series of strange and concerning events. At 8:23 a.m., she was captured on surveillance video at a nearby 7-Eleven, purchasing a $200 prepaid credit card while nervously checking outside. Later, she was seen by acquaintances near Pandora Street and at Our Place Soup Kitchen, appearing disoriented and distressed, sometimes carrying multiple bags and seeming incapable of conversation. By evening, Emma returned to the Sandy Merriman House Women's Shelter, only to learn her mother was coming from Ontario. Upset, Emma left the shelter around 6 p.m. She then hailed a taxi, asked to go to the airport, but changed her mind mid-ride, saying she couldn't pay and requesting to be taken back. The driver reported that she grew anxious listening to the taxi dispatch radio. At around 7 p.m., Victoria police officers encountered Emma standing barefoot, holding her shoes, outside the Empress Hotel. They interviewed her for roughly 45 minutes. She identified herself, claimed she was just out for a walk, and said she intended to meet a friend. She declined further assistance, and after the conversation, Emma walked away, never seen again. The following day, November 29th, Emma's van was found in the Chateau Victoria parking lot. Inside were almost all her belongings: passport, laptop, camera, clothes, books, and her personal journals. The prepaid phone she had bought the previous evening was never activated. The prepaid credit card was later used by a man who claimed to have found it on the side of the road. He was interviewed and cleared by police. Victoria Police classified Emma as missing shortly after midnight on November 29th. In the years since, over 200 leads have been pursued, but no suspect has ever been publicly named. One tip from 2018 suggested a man nicknamed William gave a distressed young woman matching Emma's description a ride early on November 29th, dropping her off near Colwood, west of Victoria. This led to searches in the area but yielded no results. In 2014, surveillance video from Vancouver's Gastown showed an unidentified man removing an Emma Filipof missing person poster, claiming she was his girlfriend and asking not to be bothered. This green shirt man remains unidentified and is considered a person of interest. The nature of Emma's disappearance, her state of mind, The abandoned van with all possessions and lack of verified sightings continues to raise questions about whether she left intentionally, suffered a mental health crisis, or became a victim of foul play. Despite years of investigation, her family still seeks answers. In her mother's words, "I won't stop searching for Emma until I know what happened." Police have released age-progressed images and continue to appeal for new information. As of today, the disappearance of Emma Filipof remains unsolved, her story a reminder of how a person can vanish, leaving only questions behind. Lindsay Buziak. On February 2, 2008, Lindsay Elizabeth Buziak, a 24-year-old real estate agent in Saanich, British Columbia, was murdered while showing a home to unknown clients. More than 16 years later, her case remains one of Canada's most mysterious unsolved homicides, a case marked by careful planning, cryptic clues, and a trail that continues to confound investigators and the public alike. Lindsay Buziak was known as ambitious and outgoing, building her career with Remax Camison. She lived in Victoria and was dating Jason Zylo, a fellow real estate agent. On February 2nd, Lindsay and Jason had lunch together, paying their bill at around 4 p.m. before parting ways. Lindsay planned to show a vacant home at 1702 D'Souza Place to a couple who had contacted her days earlier through a call that left her uneasy. A woman with a foreign accent had asked to see a house urgently, but Lindsay did not recognize the number and wondered how they obtained her contact information. The house Lindsay was scheduled to show was in a cul-de-sac in the Gordonhead area. Witnesses that evening saw a man, around 6 feet tall with dark hair, and a blonde woman in her 30s or 40s, wearing a patterned dress, walking up D'Souza Place. At about 5:30 p.m., Lindsay greeted them at the door. The trio shook hands, a gesture that, according to witnesses, indicated unfamiliarity. All three entered the house. What happened next is believed to have occurred within minutes. The coroner estimated Lindsay's time of death at around 5:40 p.m., a window supported by the timing of a so-called accidental phone call, thought to be a pocket dial, placed from Lindsay's phone. She was stabbed multiple times in the master bedroom. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting she was caught off guard or attacked from behind. The attackers left no traceable DNA or fingerprints. Meanwhile, Jason Zylo and a colleague arrived at the property shortly after 5:40 p.m. Jason reported seeing a person through the glass door, but did not immediately approach, instead parking outside and sending Lindsay a text that was never opened. After waiting roughly 10 minutes, he circled the block and then returned, finding the front door locked. Through the window, he saw Lindsay's shoes in the entryway, but no movement. Jason's colleague found an open patio door at the back and let Jason in. Jason discovered Lindsay's body upstairs, and police were called at 6:11 p.m. Paramedics arrived, but Lindsay was already dead. Investigators searched the scene for blood spatter, hair, fibers, and the murder weapon, but no knife was recovered. Bloody footprints were documented inside the home. The killers left no usable DNA or fingerprints, indicating careful planning. The phone used to arrange the showing was a prepaid cell, registered under the alias Paulo Rodriguez. Records showed it was purchased months prior in Vancouver and only used to contact Lindsay. Cell tower data traced the phone's movement to Vancouver Island before the murder. It was deactivated shortly after the crime and never used again. Police reviewed digital communications, noting that Lindsay's online and Facebook activity abruptly stopped 2 weeks before her murder, which was unusual for her. Some chat messages were missing from her laptop. Jason Zylo and his colleague were questioned and cleared as suspects, their alibis supported by surveillance footage and timelines. The identities of the client couple remain unknown. The man and woman were last seen walking away from the cul-de-sac, possibly escaping through the back. Some have speculated about connections to organized crime or a personal vendetta, but police have publicly stated they believe the murder was targeted and personally motivated, not a contract hit. In 2021, Saanich police announced renewed efforts in partnership with the FBI and RCMP, leveraging advances in DNA and forensic technology. The murder remains unsolved, with authorities still seeking public tips. Lindsay's parents, Jeff and Evelyn Buziak, continue to advocate for answers. As her father said in interviews, "Someone knows something. We just want justice for Lindsay." To this day, the murder of Lindsay Buziak stands as a chilling reminder of how a carefully executed plan can leave so many questions, and how justice for a young woman is still overdue. Maura Murray. On the cold night of February 9, 2004, a black Saturn sedan spun off a rural highway in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Police arrived within minutes. The car's driver, a 21-year-old nursing student named Maura Murray, was already gone. She has never been seen again. 20 years later, the disappearance of Maura Murray remains one of the most haunting and debated missing persons cases in the United States. Tonight, we follow the trail of her final hours, the evidence left behind, and the enduring mysteries that have kept her case alive. Maura Murray grew up in Massachusetts. She was a promising student athlete, enrolled as a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, her life was marked by stress and secrecy. On February 5th, she was visibly upset by a late-night phone call from her sister Kathleen. That same night, she crashed her father's car near campus. She told him the next day she'd hit some sand and slid, but her overall mood appeared troubled. Monday, February 9th. Maura's actions were precise but puzzling. She emailed a homework assignment at 3:32 a.m. By lunchtime, she was calling about rental condos in Vermont and messaging her boyfriend Bill, promising to call. At 1:24 p.m., she sent professors a message claiming she'd be away for a week due to a death in the family. There was no such death. This was a fabrication. That afternoon, she withdrew nearly all her cash at an ATM, redeemed bottles at a liquor store, and bought alcohol. By evening, she was on the road, driving north out of Massachusetts, toward the White Mountains of New Hampshire. At approximately 7:20 p.m., Maura's Saturn went off Route 112, a remote stretch outside the small town of Haverhill. A local woman heard the accident and called 911. By the time police arrived, the car was locked and empty. The airbags had deployed. A Coke bottle containing red liquid, believed to be wine, sat in the car. Stains of the same color appeared on the driver's side door and ceiling. Also inside the car, her textbooks, medications, birth control, changes of clothes, printed MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, and accident report forms she'd collected earlier that day. No footprints were found in the snow leading away from the crash. Cadaver dogs, search teams, and volunteers combed the woods and streams in the days and weeks that followed. They found no trace of Maura Murray. The circumstances fueled countless theories. Did Maura intend to vanish, staging her disappearance? Did she meet with foul play after leaving her car, abducted by a passing motorist? Some believe she wandered into the woods and succumbed to the elements. Others suspect she was picked up and taken far from the scene. Her family, especially her father Fred, has always maintained that Maura was a victim of a crime. Over the years, bone fragments have been tested, tips pursued, and, Possible sightings investigated, all without result. Some point to evidence of planning. The false email to professors, the cash withdrawal, the MapQuest directions to a different town. Yet other details, her personal items left behind, the sudden crash, her emotional state, point toward crisis, not calculation. As years passed, the search for Maura never truly stopped. Independent investigators, bloggers, and a vast online community have kept the case alive, pushing for transparency and action. Legal battles for the release of police records have only added to the mystery. In 2024, the FBI issued a new VICAP alert, renewing national attention on her case and reaffirming that Maura's disappearance remains an open, active investigation. To this day, there is no confirmed evidence of where Maura went after that winter night in New Hampshire. The rural highway where her car was found still stands quiet, its secrets untouched. For Maura Murray's family, and for the many who have followed her story, the hope is that answers still exist, waiting to be uncovered. Until then, her disappearance stands as one of the most compelling mysteries in American true crime. A story of a young woman lost on the edge of the wilderness, and a search that has yet to end. If you've made it this far into the story, consider subscribing. Your support helps keep these names in the light. Madeleine Beth McCann. On the night of May 3, 2007, in the coastal resort town of Praia da Luz, Portugal, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from her family's holiday apartment. The disappearance of Madeleine remains, to this day, one of the world's most agonizing and publicized mysteries. Madeleine Beth McCann was born on May 12, 2003, just days before her family set out on what was supposed to be a peaceful vacation. The McCanns, Jerry and Kate, both doctors from the UK, brought Madeleine and her younger twin siblings to the Algarve region with family friends and their children. The group was staying at apartment 5A, a ground-floor unit in a quiet holiday complex. On the day Madeleine disappeared, the family spent time by the pool. Kate McCann snapped a photograph of Madeleine in the early afternoon. Later that evening, the children were put to bed around 7 p.m. The adults then went to dine at a tapas restaurant just 55 meters away, maintaining a system of regular checks on the sleeping children. Sometime between 8:30 and 10 p.m., someone entered the apartment. At about 10 p.m., Kate McCann went to check on her children and found Madeleine's bed empty, the window open, and the child gone. In a single instant, a normal family holiday turned into an international nightmare. The alarm was raised immediately. Resort guests and staff, police, and neighbors began searching the area. Portuguese police arrived within the hour, followed by the country's criminal investigators. The investigation quickly drew international attention, with British police and media soon deeply involved. Despite the rapid response, no sign of Madeleine was found in the first hours or days. The McCanns and friends searched the apartment complex, nearby streets, and the surrounding scrubland. Sniffer and cadaver dogs were eventually brought in. According to police reports, they alerted behind a sofa and inside a wardrobe in apartment 5A. Some blood traces were reportedly found, but the evidentiary value and significance of these finds remain controversial to this day. Meanwhile, Madeleine's parents, desperate for answers, launched the Leaving No Stone Unturned Fund to finance a private search and keep public attention alive. But as days turned to weeks, the investigation began to fracture under the weight of false leads, contradictory witness statements, and intense global scrutiny. In the first months, Portuguese police investigated several suspects. Robert Murray, a British expat living nearby, was made a formal suspect and later cleared. The McCanns themselves were named arguidos, formal suspects, in September 2007, only for that status to be lifted a year later. One of the most persistent threads in the case is the involvement of Christian Bruckner, a German national with a criminal record who lived in the Algarve at the time. In 2020, German prosecutors declared him the prime suspect, citing phone data and disturbing materials allegedly recovered from his property. Yet despite international cooperation and renewed searches, including large-scale excavations near his former home in 2025, no conclusive evidence has been found linking Bruckner or anyone else to Madeleine's disappearance. Other theories have been debated and discarded. Reports of Madeleine's DNA in a car rented by the McCanns were later challenged for possible contamination. Alleged sightings and leads, both in Portugal and abroad, were investigated and disproved. Each false hope seemed only to deepen the mystery. 18 years later, Madeleine McCann's case remains unsolved. The Portuguese, British, and German authorities continue to share evidence and chase leads. Periodic public appeals, new search efforts, and the occasional promise of a breakthrough keep the world's attention. In 2025, another round of searches concluded without a result, and the prime suspect, Bruckner, was released from prison after serving an unrelated sentence. Despite it all, no one has been charged. No remains have been found. And for her family, the agony of not knowing remains. Madeleine McCann's disappearance changed the way the world thinks about child safety, international investigations, and the limits of justice. Nearly 2 decades on, the single unanswered question, what happened to Madeleine, still echoes through the Algarve and far beyond. Kyron Horman. On the morning of June 4, 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman walked into Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, carrying a science project and a smile. By afternoon, he was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that has haunted the Pacific Northwest for years. Kyron lived with his father, Kyron Horman, and stepmother, Terry Horman. That morning, it was Terry who dropped Kyron off at Skyline for the school's science fair. She stayed with him as he set up his display and snapped photographs, images she would later upload to Facebook. According to Terry, she last saw Kyron at about 8:45 a.m., watching him walk down the hallway toward his classroom. After leaving the school, Terry says she ran errands at 2 Fred Meyer stores and then drove her infant daughter around, hoping to soothe an earache. She told investigators she worked out at a gym and later, at 1:21 p.m., posted those science fair photos of Kyron online. That afternoon, Kyron's family went to the bus stop to pick him up, but when the bus arrived, Kyron was not on board. The driver reported he hadn't seen him all day. Alarmed, Kyron and Terry phoned the school. Moments later, at around 3 p.m., a school employee called 911. Police were dispatched immediately. Officers arrived within minutes, searching both the school and the Horman home. By 7 p.m., the Multnomah County Sheriff's search and rescue team had joined the effort. The FBI was brought in just before 9 p.m. The sense of urgency was unmistakable. A little boy had simply vanished, and every passing hour made finding him harder. In the following days, search efforts expanded into the dense woods surrounding the school, as well as nearby neighborhoods and even to Sauvie Island, a rural area across the river. More than 1,300 volunteers participated at the height of the search, combing through brush, riverbanks, and rural roads. Tips flooded in, and a reward for information grew to $50,000. Despite the scale of the search, no physical trace of Kyron, no clothing, no backpack, no remains was ever found. As time passed, the focus shifted from the woods to those closest to Kyron. Investigators scrutinized Terry Horman's timeline, comparing receipts, gym records, and phone logs. Some witnesses claimed to have seen another person in Terry's truck outside the school that morning, though these sightings remain unverified. The investigation grew stranger. A family landscaper alleged that months earlier, Terry had tried to hire him to kill her husband, Caney, but no charges were ever filed. Another friend of Terry's, Day Spierer, was subpoenaed by a grand jury after reports surfaced she might have helped Terry acquire an untraceable phone. Still, no one was charged, and police repeatedly emphasized that the case was unsolved. One of the major challenges for investigators was the lack of hard evidence. The school had no confirmed surveillance footage of Kyron after the morning drop-off. There were no witnesses who could say for certain that he entered his classroom. No forensic trace, no body, no belongings ever turned up, despite exhaustive efforts. Years have now passed. In 2025, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office began digitizing every scrap of evidence, from case reports to tip-line calls, in hopes that the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit could spot something new. Officials continue to call the investigation active, and a $50,000 reward is still on offer. Kyron's mother, Desiree Young, even filed a civil suit against Terry, alleging kidnapping, but later dropped it to avoid interfering with the criminal case. To this day, Kyron Horman's fate remains unknown. His smiling face endures on missing person posters, and the search for answers goes on, quiet, relentless, and unresolved. In the silence left behind, one thing is clear. Somewhere, someone knows what happened that June morning. For Kyron's family and community, the hope is that someday, the truth will finally come to light. Relisha Rudd. On March 1, 2014, 8-year-old Relisha Rudd was last seen alive in Washington, D.C. Her disappearance would expose not just the tragic loss of a child, but a tangle of missed warnings, systemic failure, and questions that linger unanswered. Relisha was living with her mother and siblings in the D.C. General Family Shelter, a sprawling, troubled facility for homeless families in the nation's capital. Life there was never easy. The family had bounced between motels, shelters, and public housing, already familiar with instability. Social services had investigated her family multiple times for neglect and inadequate supervision. But Relisha's situation, like that of many children in poverty, slipped through the cracks. Within the shelter, Relisha and her family met Khalil Tatum, a janitor in his early 50s. He befriended Relisha, showering her with gifts like a tablet and taking her on outings. Relisha's mother, Shamika Young, came to trust him, even allowing him to take her daughter out of the shelter on multiple occasions. When Relisha began missing school in early 2014, her mother and Tatum told the school she was sick, under the care of a Dr. Tatum. In reality, Tatum was no doctor, just a staff member who had taken an unusual interest in a vulnerable child. The ruse was enough to keep school and agency officials at bay, allowing Relisha's absence to go unchallenged for weeks. The last confirmed sighting of Relisha was captured by a hotel surveillance camera on March 1, 2014. In the footage, she walks quietly down a hallway alongside Tatum. No one knows what happened to her after that moment. What is clear is that Relisha would never be seen alive again. Over the next weeks, Tatum continued the deception. On March 10th, school officials reached out to him for medical documentation. He promised she'd be back soon. On March 13th, after 10 days of unexcused absences, Relisha's family was finally reported to the city's Child and Family Services Agency for educational neglect. But by then, precious time had been lost. On March 19th, a social worker arrived at the shelter to meet with Dr. Tatum. He didn't show up. The next day, police found Tatum's wife, Andrea, dead from a gunshot wound in a Maryland motel. By March 31st, Tatum himself was found dead in a D.C. park, an apparent suicide, with the same gun that killed Andrea. Investigators pieced together Tatum's final days and discovered troubling details. Media reported he had purchased trash bags, lime, and a shovel, fueling suspicions of a cover-up. Searches of parks, rivers, hotels, and the shelter itself turned up no trace of Relisha. Without Tatum to question, the investigation stalled, leaving only speculation about Relisha's fate. Multiple agencies reviewed the case. D.C. police, the FBI, and city officials all examined what went wrong. Their findings revealed breakdowns at nearly every stage. Despite months of school absences and prior family instability, action had been slow. The Dr. Tatum lie was accepted at face value, and interagency communication was poor. While the city issued a report and recommended reforms, many of those changes remain unfinished. No one has been charged in Relisha's disappearance. Theories abound. Some suggest she was murdered. Others believe she was sold into trafficking, though police say evidence for trafficking is lacking. No remains have ever been found. Relisha's case brought national attention to the plight of missing Black children and exposed inequities in how their disappearances are treated. The D.C. government's own review admitted that the system had failed to protect her, though it stopped short of saying her disappearance was fully preventable. Today, Relisha's face remains on missing children posters. The search is still open, but as years pass, answers seem farther away. Her story stands as both a tragedy and a warning, a reminder of what can be lost when vulnerable children fall through society's safety nets. Lauren Spierer. It's the early morning hours of June 3, 2011. In Bloomington, Indiana, the bars have closed, and most students are finding their way home. But for 20-year-old Lauren Spierer, a night out with friends is about to end in a way that no one could have imagined, and that still haunts the Indiana University community to this day. Lauren Elizabeth Spierer was a petite, lively college student from New York, studying textiles merchandising at Indiana University. Blonde hair, blue eyes, barely 5 feet tall, she was known for her warmth, her sense of style, and her close circle of friends. But in the early hours of June 3rd, she simply vanished, and a decade later, her fate remains one of America's most perplexing missing persons cases. The evening began with Lauren attending a party at her friend Jay Rosenbaum's apartment. Later, she was seen leaving with Corey Rossman, a fellow student. Another friend, Michael Beth, was in the mix as well. Surveillance cameras later captured Lauren entering Kilroy's sports bar at 1:46 a.m. She was visibly enjoying herself, but also consuming alcohol and, according to later interviews, drugs, a dangerous combination given her small size and a rare heart condition. At 2:27 a.m., Lauren left the bar with Rossman, leaving behind her phone and shoes, signs of heavy intoxication. The two made their way back toward her apartment complex, Smallwood Plaza. Cameras caught Lauren and Rossman walking through an alley and exiting toward a vacant lot. It's the last time Lauren is definitively seen on camera. Between 2:51 a.m. and around 4:30 a.m., details grow murky. Some witnesses say Lauren was last seen barefoot, wearing black leggings and a white shirt, stumbling south on College Avenue. Rossman, who was with her earlier, later claimed to have been punched and suffering memory loss, leaving a gap in his account. Other friends, including Rosenbaum and Beth, were questioned, provided DNA samples, and faced public scrutiny, but none have ever been charged. When Lauren failed to return home or respond to messages that morning, her friends grew concerned. By midday, her parents had arrived from New York, and flyers blanketed Bloomington. Police and volunteers launched extensive searches, canvassing bars, alleyways, and the apartment complex. In August 2011, investigators spent 9 days searching the Sycamore Ridge landfill, yet no evidence of Lauren was found. Over the years, the investigation broadened. Thousands of tips poured in, from possible sightings to theories involving abduction and accidental death. In 2016, cadaver dogs searched a rural property in Martinsville linked to a man named Justin Wagers. Excavations and a towed truck yielded no human remains. Other leads included comparisons to the 2015 murder of another IU student, Hannah Wilson, and even internet rumors about serial killers, none substantiated. More recently, a 2024 book revealed new interviews with people who sold Lauren drugs that night. But even these revelations did not provide a breakthrough. The absence of Lauren's body remains the central challenge. Without physical evidence, every theory, foul play, abduction, accidental overdose followed by a cover-up remains just that, a theory. Friends' accounts of the night, including possible memory lapses and substance use, add to the confusion but resolve little. The Spierer family, desperate for answers, filed a civil lawsuit against the young men who were last with Lauren, alleging negligence. The courts dismissed the suit, ruling that the link between their actions and Lauren's fate was too speculative to meet legal standards. Lauren's disappearance attracted national media attention, an example of what some call missing white woman syndrome. Yet, despite years of searching, multi-agency collaboration, and countless theories, her case remains unsolved. Today, the flyers have faded, but her memory remains strong on campus and with her family, who continue to hope for answers. The last known images of Lauren, walking alone in the darkness, barefoot and vulnerable, are a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can vanish and how hard it can be to find the truth when the trail goes cold. Sarm Heslop. March 7, 2021. In the balmy air of St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Sarm Heslop and her boyfriend, Ryan Bain, set off for dinner ashore. By all outward signs, it was just another night in paradise, laughter, good food, a couple enjoying island life from the deck of their catamaran, the siren song, moored in the bay. But before sunrise, everything would change. Sarm Heslop would vanish without a trace, and a web of unanswered questions would begin to tighten around the last man known to see her alive. Sarm Joan Lillian Heslop was a 41-year-old British woman, once a flight attendant, now working as a chef and first mate aboard the yacht with Bain. She was adventurous, outgoing, and carried a distinctive, colorful tattoo, a seahorse, butterfly, and flower on her shoulder. Friends describe her as someone who relished new experiences, but was careful and responsible. On the evening of March the 7th, Sarm and Bain were seen dining together in St. John. At 8:45 p.m., new CCTV footage would later show the couple walking hand in hand down a dock, boarding their dinghy to return to the siren song. This detail would become crucial, as Bain initially claimed they returned to the boat closer to 10 p.m., a full hour's discrepancy that remains unexplained. Back on board, what happened next is a mystery. Bain says they went to bed as usual, but sometime after 2:30 a.m., he claimed to be awakened by the anchor alarm and discovered Sarm was missing. At 2:35 a.m., he called local police. Oddly, he waited another 9 hours before contacting the U.S. Coast Guard for marine search support, a delay that family and investigators have never been able to justify. Local authorities responded that night, searching the surrounding waters and shorelines, But notably, the siren song itself was not searched. Bain, now acting on the advice of his attorney, would resist or delay any full forensic examination of the yacht. In the weeks and months that followed, he would move the boat, rename it, and eventually attempt to sell it, actions that only deepened suspicion. Sarm's passport, wallet, phone, and money were all left behind on the boat. For many, this detail pointed to the unlikelihood that she'd left of her own accord. No clothing, personal effects, or body were ever recovered, despite searches using divers, drones, and extensive public appeals. The investigation has been criticized from the start. Authorities' failure to immediately search the yacht may have destroyed vital forensic evidence. Bain, the only known person with Sarm that night, has never been formally charged, nor thoroughly questioned under oath. Reports emerged that after the disappearance, he replaced parts of the boat's interior and even the freezer, raising uncomfortable questions about whether evidence was lost or destroyed. 9 days after Sarm vanished, a local dog walker reported hearing a scream at sea, coming from the direction of the moored siren song. The report was never conclusively linked to Sarm and remains an unconfirmed clue. Sarm's family, frustrated by withheld CCTV footage and a lack of progress, have pressed authorities in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the UK, and beyond for answers. Their calls for the case to be reclassified as a homicide and not simply a missing person have yet to be heeded. In 2025, renewed attention arrived with the release of new CCTV footage and a BBC documentary. The footage contradicted Bain's original timeline and injected new urgency into the investigation. But with the boat sold and Bain remaining largely uncooperative, the case drifts in legal and investigative limbo. As of now, no one has been charged. Sarm Heslop remains missing. Her disappearance an open wound for her family and a chilling reminder of how quickly paradise can become a puzzle, one with pieces that may never be found. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.